Hello, everybody!
Turn this up in our headphones, Charles.
Turning it up. Hello, everybody, one and all. Welcome back to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy Podcast. My name is Charles, and with me today is my lifelong friend and co-host, Dylan.
I'm ready to talk some fantasy with my friends, Charles.
Yes, we say the plural friends again because we have the honor, nay, the privilege to be joined today with author Nicholas Eames, who has written the Band series, which includes Kings of the Wyld and Bloody Rose. The third book is coming out soon. We won't put a hard date on that. And, he's gotten the honor of multiple Stabby Awards, and he's been optioning the film rights to this series, if I'm not mistaken, and just a lot of exciting energy around the Band series. And we had the enjoyment of being able to talk about the series a little while ago, and we're just super thrilled to have Nick on. Nick, thank you so much for being on the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's an honor. And yeah, thank you again for that really nice review you gave of the book a few weeks back. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, we were so thrilled because we released the episode, and then you were like, I'm paraphrasing here, but something along the lines of
podcast ever.
Something along the lines of greatest podcast ever, and best analysis of the Kings of the Wyld you ever heard, something along those lines.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. No, sometimes I put like things like with reviews or something of the book on while I'm doing dishes or something, and I recall listening to this one being like, oh wow, yeah, I guess that character is pretty deep. I didn't. Sure.
Well, we appreciate that greatly. You wrote them, yeah. I mean, that's that's the thing too, because I had read, like, in the back of the copy that I had, there was like an interview with, like, you had given some insight into the process, and you had mentioned, like, yeah, I tried not to take it too seriously, this, that, and the other. And Dylan and I were kind of like pushing back. We were like, yeah, I mean, it's fun and it's silly, but these characters are fascinating, and the whole premise of the book, as everyone knows, is like such a great hook, and we feel honored that we were able to bring some of that, like, that fine balance in. And I guess that's one of the first questions we wanted to ask you right out of the gate is, like, how do you with Kings of the Wyld and the Band series, how do you balance that idea of humor while also making the characters authentic, and then you have this hook of, like, they're all like rock and roll bands kind of influence, and then there's these huge monsters, there's erectile dysfunction jokes, but how do you balance all of that to create, like, a story that's ultimately, like, character driven?
Well, the answer is that I don't balance it that well. Then my editors help me balance it. I always push it a little bit over the top. But yeah, I think it's because I spent a long time trying to write this book that was super serious and super, melodramatic and had its sad moments. My favorite author of all time is guy Gabriel Kay. I'm not sure if you ever read him before, but he obviously writes very poignant books. And so I was trying for years to kind of copy him and failing miserably. And so it was more like when I tried to write a book that was a bit more honest to my own voice, that it came out the way it did. And I think I tried at the beginning, at least, to make it the opposite of everything I'd been doing for the last 10 years. So if you'd have told me, or even, like, say my late 30s or early 30s, I should say, my late 30s weren't that long ago. But my early 30s, like, if you told me of this book, here's this book, it's great, it's got goblins in it, I've been like, no, I'm not. What am I, 18 years old? Like, I don't read books with goblins in them. Thank you very much. I'm a grown-ass man.
Right.
By then, I was kind of weaned on books like Game of Thrones or Joe Abercrombie, who they may have their odd like fantasy element, but otherwise they're pretty, like, down to earth. They're all humans, humans on humans, as it were.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
originally, I tried to just, like, kitchen sink it, like, anything that was goofy, funny, over the top. And then there was a few scenes in there that they got snipped, whether they got taken out entirely by my agent or my editor, or else just curtailed, to be a bit more like the erection scene where there's a scene where everyone fights with erections. That scene, like my agent originally wanted it taken out, and I was like, sure, like this is our first conversation. I was like, sure, it's gone, whatever you want. But all my friends were like, you got to keep it in, you got to keep it in. And so I ended up just kind of changing some of the language a bit. Took out the word like gestating, things like that. It's amazing what a couple descriptive adjectives can do to change a scene. So
Right.
yeah, I mean, that kind of fought for some of the goofy stuff too. But
I can imagine, yeah, because this book was published like on the heels of a huge trend in fantasy with the likes of Game of Thrones, and then this huge like grimdark boom that we've seen following that. And one of the things I was very curious about was like you had that initial reaction, like goblins, no, thank you. What was that like getting a book with goblins and stuff in it published? I'm sure you must have tried to reach out to agents and editors. Like, did they have similar initial reactions?
Yeah, they did. There was a lot of pushback, and I feel extremely lucky that I ended up finding the agent that I did, and then especially the editor that I did, just because, you know, especially for me who'd been trying to write for so long, you know, I was pretty desperate to, you know, I would have jumped in and they did really kind of.
Yeah.
I say that though, but there was an agent that was like had me on the hook, a really, really good agent that I submitted my first book to, and he said, you know, this is not quite what I'm looking for, but send me whatever you write next. So I sent him Kings of the Wyld before anyone else. And I mean, I remember this one morning, I woke up to an email that said, I'm not saying yes, but I'm not saying no. Are you willing to work with me on this? And I was like, this is a yes. Oh my God, I've got an agent. So we went back and forth, and he actually wanted a lot of changes. And there's some of the changes stuck around, and ultimately he did make the book way, way, way better. But his vision and my vision wasn't quite the same for it. But there was a lot of characters like Calorek, for instance, their manager of the band was an orc. There's a lot more fantasy creatures in it, and he wanted that toned down a bit. So he would change to a human. His nickname was the orc. And there was other things like he wanted Moog's name changed because he was the kind of person that he was a bit older than me. He got every single music reference there was, every one of them, and he thought it was way too many, which is understandable from his perspective. But he wanted like Slowhand gone, like Clay's nickname Slowhand, because it's an Eric Clapton album and Eric Clapton's nickname. And I tried to explain, I was like, I cannot assure you enough that nobody under the age of 40 in America has any fucking idea what Slowhand is. Nobody. And he said, that's not true. Everyone knows this. So things like that. And so I ended up saying, can I keep one of them? And he's like, okay. So I chose, what did I choose? I kept Moog and I took Slowhand out of it. And then after a few months though, we just had a little bit too many disagreements, and eventually he was like, I'm really sorry, but I'm not gonna take this. So I was pretty crushed, but by then the book was in a better spot, and I end up like, you know, taking all his advice, like things like the airships were, before he got a hold of it, were more like airplanes, like they had propellers and engines, and Larkspur's ship was like a B-52 bomber kind of thing. Yeah, and so it was like because of him that I developed things like the tidal engines and even the Druids. Like before that, I just had like a Roman type empire in there, and so he did make me make a lot of positive changes. But so I'm definitely grateful for his advice. But in the end, yeah, we went our separate ways, and I ended up moving the book a little bit back towards where it was before, obviously.
Wow. So how much time went from when you first started emailing out Kings of the Wyld till it was ready for publication? How much of a refinement process was it? Because it sounds like it was quite extensive.
Well, actually, it wasn't that long, only because I was like, I worked my ass off on it. Like, you know, cause you're so excited to have this suddenly your foot in the door, maybe, or see a crack of light. And so I think maybe say I finished it in like February or March of whatever year it was. I think it was 2015 or something. And maybe by the summertime, I think I maybe sent it to him, and we went back and forth for a few months. And so when I sent it out to agents again, it was probably another 6 months before I started getting some rejections from agents. And then I've told the story a million times before. Have you ever heard about Sebastian de Castell and how he kind of helped me get
Yes, yes, you were working at
Yeah.
the restaurant, and
Yeah.
he was a guest there, a diner,
So by then he kind of helped me put me in touch with his agent.
which is
And
such
so
a great story.
yeah, yeah. So I sent it to her, and then she ended up getting back to me. And with her, like she got back to me around July, and we decided that she was going to take it. And then we worked on it for the entire summer. And then around September, we started submitting it. And by like late December, early January, we had like 2 different offers on it. The one was from Orbit. So
Wow.
That's great. I mean, it seems like a lot of the like success that got the book where this was you really had to advocate for what you believed in this story, and you had to like have the balls to approach Sebastian de Castell as a waiter, and he's a diner, to just like to fan out and like talk about your book and stuff like that. Like, did you feel a lot of that? Did you really feel like, wow, this is like I'm really kind of nervous right now, but I believe in the story, and I really got to like get it out there. Like, how much like did you have to kind of get out of your comfort zone to hustle for this book?
Well, not too much. I mean, I didn't try to, like, when I say I talked to Sebastian de Castell, like I saw his name on the reservation list. I knew he lived in Vancouver, so I just approached him and shot the shit. And I was like, "Oh, I'm writing a book," and he was super gracious. Obviously, I went, "Oh, great, one of these guys."
Yeah.
So he was super nice about it. And then when I saw him again at a writers festival, and he remembered who I was, and he asked how the book was coming. And I think when I told him about that agent, because that agent was such a big agent, he realized that, okay, maybe this book, obviously, like if it was that close to getting picked up by the agent, maybe it's just not the right book for that agent. So
Right.
but honestly, it's just something that I think a lot of people, I mean, and it's funny to say, but a lot of just like white dudes, like they feel that not that I say like I felt entitled, but I think white dudes a lot more than say like women or people of color are willing to go, think that they should work, ask for things from the world themselves. And at the time I had a girlfriend who was a person of color, and she was like, "You fucking do this because you've got the privilege to do it. So like, don't fucking squander this. Like, you don't know what it's like for someone who's not like you." So and so like I know Sebastian does this as well. He always tries to encourage, people that aren't, just like middle-aged straight white dudes, to advocate for themselves more than they should. Like, you always should take that chance, reach out to people and just ask the world for opportunities, because it doesn't always, hand them to you.
Yeah,
That's true.
it's great to use your position to try to empower folks who wouldn't feel that same, I guess, natural inclination to always advocate for themselves. So
Yeah.
that's great that you and Sebastian are focusing on that.
And you don't always think it's unconscious. And obviously, if she hadn't brought it to my attention, I might not have ever realized it. But then there's also things I remember when it was, I think I'd finished the book and maybe it was out, but the guy who plays like Abed from Community, you guys ever watch Community?
Yeah, Danny Pudi
Dylan is a huge Community fan.
I'm obsessed with Community. I've watched through it many times. Oh yeah, it's so
you just
funny,
opened the floodgates, Nick.
Tell us all about Community. I want to hear your
I worked
takes.
at in Vancouver had a lot of like famous people coming into it all the time. And one day Abed was sitting at the bar, and I think because I was the only cool person that worked there, I was like, "You guys know who this is?" Like, no one else knew who it was. Every time someone like from a really good TV show, like from someone from Serenity would come in, or someone from Battlestar Galactica, and I would be like, "We got to buy this person's meal. They're getting free dessert." And people were like, "Who is this?" And I'm like, "It's fucking Kaylee from Serenity. It's fine." But yeah, wow. Abed was in there. Sorry, I don't recall his real name. Danny
Pudi, I believe. Yes,
but he was in there, and I would never have said anything to him about my book. But of course, my coworker's like, "Oh, this Nick's writing a fantasy book. It's about this." And he's like, "Oh, what's your book about?" What was he reading at the time? I think he was reading Sandman by Neil Gaiman.
Nice.
Yeah, and he was super nice and great. He was like, "What's your book about?" And I told him what the idea was. He's like, "That's a really good idea."
That's awesome.
Oh, I love the idea of Danny Pudi reading Kings of the Wyld. Nick, please tell me he gave you some indication that he was going to go pick up a copy.
Well, I think it was interactions like that when I told people what the basic idea was, seeing people's kind of face lit up, as opposed to like my book before that, which was like, "Oh, it's about a prince and he's got revenge on his brother," and blah, 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 blah. And people's eyes just kind of glaze over.
Right.
When you tell people the hook of Kings of the Wyld, they almost always kind of perk up.
that was, I mean, that was my thing right away. I can't tell you how many people have recommended Kings of the Wild to me for years and years because they knew I was like anyone that knows me
Yeah.
knows I'm a fantasy fan, and they know that I am a music fan as well. And so everyone's
Yeah.
like, God, read Kings of the Wild. It's like mercenaries that are like rock bands. And I was like, yes, I should read that book. And it finally crossed our desk a few weeks ago. And it was, yeah, it's such a fantastic hook. It's one of those ideas that's like, it just clicks. And it's interesting in that for me, when I see that a fantasy book is funny, like is a comedy kind of book, I get a little bit nervous sometimes. Just like some people hear that, oh, it's got orcs in it and elven princesses or whatever, and you like get a little nervous. But just the way that modern fantasy is going and embracing a lot of these trends, but keeping it grounded in like good character work and having a little more modern sense of humor, like it just zings, and I'm like, I need more of this.
Yeah. Yeah, well, thankfully, we are seeing a lot more like humorous fantasy kind of hit the shelves, or even not the shelves, but like, have you guys read Orconomics or heard of Orconomics by Zachary?
We know, yeah, that Spiffbo winner, right? Yeah, we've heard so much about it, and definitely heard comparisons to Kings of the Wild with its humor. Yeah, we gotta check it out.
Yeah, I think it's funnier than Kings of the Wild.
Of course you'd say that. Too humble.
Well, I mean, Kings of the Wild's more dramatic, obviously. But I think it melds really well. It melds that, like, when something bad happens to its characters, you feel really bad for them. So it's not complete satire. But oh my God, they're genius. They're great. I listened to them on audiobooks. That and the sequel. The sequel's even better.
Wow.
That
one's on our short list for sure, because that's another one that's, we like to ask for recommendations all the time on the show, and like things like Kings of the Wild and Orconomics get brought up enough times that we're like, okay, put these on the short list to read on the show. So that one we've been eyeing for quite a while, and it's interesting to see that trend, and I'm all for it too. It's the other, I mean, like the music angle too is one that is obviously super fascinating to me. I wore my Van Halen 2007. I saw them at Madison Square Garden. I wore this just for you, Nick. And
and he's got his guitar in the background too. He's really showing off for you.
Is that back there? Oh, how embarrassing!
How did that get there? Yeah, I'm surprised he didn't play something for you.
I've been working on this song. If you guys want to hear it, no. But it's a fascinating trend. And one of the silly questions that I wanted to ask you is, what was your first concert?
Oh, it's a great answer, actually. My first concert was Rod Stewart.
Oh,
wow. And believe it or not, like, I'm actually too young to be a Rod Stewart fan.
Right.
Generally speaking, but my mom was a huge Rod Stewart fan. There's Rod Stewart records all over my house when I was like a kid. And I saw someone once make a reference to like Rod Stewart, like, I fucking your mom from album covers. And I was like, oh my God, that's what he was doing all those years of my life. He's always looking so sultry on those covers. But when I was a teenager, I think I was going through some college era love and loss and things like that, and feeling bad for myself. And I put a Rod Stewart record on for I don't know what reason. And I was like, this song, I'm like, yeah, Rod, the first cut is the deepest. Like, holy Jesus, you're right. Then the next song came
very
on.
healing.
I was like, this is really hard. This is you know what I'm going through.
Rod. To you, Nick.
The song was just like, this is insane. I love it. Rod Stewart fan. And then whenever I was, I don't know how this started happening, but whether I was back when I used to get haircuts, if I was getting a haircut or in the grocery store or about to travel somewhere, Rod Stewart would come on randomly. And I developed this thing as the least superstitious person that has ever existed on planet Earth, that whenever you hear a Rod Stewart song, you're in the right place at the right time.
Oh, nice.
I know how it came.
Way to live.
Why it happened. It happened originally because I had woken up on this day and I was in a rough time in my life, and I had slept through my alarm, missed like 3 buses on the way to work. I was hopelessly late for work, and I was sitting at this bus stop, and there was this disheveled man sitting next to me with a giant bouquet of roses, and he was whistling a Rod Stewart song. And I was like, you know what? I'm glad I slept through my alarm and missed all 3 of those buses. This guy, wherever he's going with that bouquet of roses, whatever his hopes are, he's whistling Rod Stewart to get him through to that moment. So,
Yeah.
Wow, Rod Stewart coming in. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
so I love him, and I still love him. We still, my whole family, it's ascribes to the, if you hear Rod Stewart, you can't like put him on yourself, it's cheating. But if he just comes
Right.
on,
You
oh,
can't
he's-
come on
you can't force the
naturally.
moment.
No.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
I was in the
Rod Stewart has to
airport
come into
about-
your life.
Exactly. I was in the airport waiting lounge, waiting to come home to visit my family, and heard Rod Stewart, and I'm like, oh, good things are going to happen at home. And 2 days after I got home, I got a call. I got the email from my agent saying I want to represent you. So
That's
Wow.
awesome. Thank you, Rod Stewart.
Yes.
yeah.
Our ears are going to be perked listening for Rod Stewart everywhere we go from here on out, Nick, thanks to you.
Yeah.
So.
But this concert was just me, my brother, my friend. I think my girlfriend bought us tickets at the time, and then about 30,000 middle-aged women wailing at the top of their lungs.
Nice. Yes. Rod
We were
Stewart,
part of the youngest people there.
romancing all of our moms, inspiring the Eames family. Like, what can't the guy do? Dylan, what was your first concert? I don't think I know this answer.
Santana, yeah.
Your first concert was Santana.
Yeah,
So was mine.
Wow,
what?
crazy.
Yes, my parents.
Really?
My parents took me to see Santana when I was really too young, and I just remember sitting
too.
there being like, "Is this like maybe we went to the same show?"
Probably went to the same show.
How did we not know this about each other?
I don't know. So Charles and I have known each other for,
over 20
decades
years.
at this point. Yeah. And yeah, I don't know. Somehow it was on Long Island.
Yeah, I saw it at Jones Beach.
Yeah,
We probably went to the same
That would
show.
be-
Our parents couldn't get babysitters and brought us.
Yeah.
I
Wow,
just remember
that's-
like people shouting at each other, and like I don't remember the music too much. I was too young. I just remember being like, "Who are these
Me
weird
too.
people? What are these weird smells?"
It's
That's pretty wild.
yeah, just generally loud. I mean, I remember a sense of enjoyment from it, but I don't think I could really process what was happening. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's funny. And then, but we went to see Motley Crue and Aerosmith. That was
Aerosmith.
like when we went together to go and listen, and that was
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I was a huge like band geek in high school, so I dragged anyone I could to all the shows whenever possible.
That's pretty awesome. I've never lived somewhere where you could see concerts like that like pretty easily, except maybe Ottawa a little bit, but Vancouver. But by then there's no good rock bands touring too often.
Yeah, I can see that. We were fortunate to be in, between the stadiums on Long Island and then being a train ride to Manhattan, we could see pretty much anything.
Yeah.
But it got kind of expensive. I mean, some of these acts want like hundreds of
bet.
dollars. You're like, what? Get out of here. But that's awesome. Do you play any music, Nick, or are you just a fan?
Yeah, just a fan. And even, I don't play anything at all.
If you could like wake up tomorrow and be proficient in one instrument, which would it be?
That's a tricky question. Good question. Probably the guitar.
Yeah, I mean, that's
that.
the cool one, right?
Right.
Well, the piano is an elegant weapon, but the guitar is a weapon, instrument.
Potentially a weapon in the next book.
Yeah, well, that's the whole King's the Wild mix, right? Calling it an axe is right. The whole thing is still flowing through your head there, Nick. Those creative juices flowing.
And I can't say I ever imagine myself playing the piano during a song, but I definitely I imagine myself playing a riff once in a while.
Sure. Being the crooner. That's awesome. So I guess we should talk more about Kings of the Wild. One of the things that's exciting to me is that like the pinned tweet on your Twitter profile is that it's been optioned for film, and I'm sure you can't share too many details, but I was wondering what that process has been like, if there's any lessons that you've learned that you could share about the process, and who knows, maybe we can be expecting something.
Yeah, I mean what I'd heard before that, what you hear about publishing is pretty much always true. Like before I got into it, people are like, "Oh, only 5% of authors like can make a living," and I was like, "No, that's true." And then same with optioning, you hear about like 95% of the time, nothing comes of it. Probably even more than that. But so it's been optioned, and there's people that are like shopping it around, and they have definitely hit some like favorable things. So it's in a kind of a stage now where people are looking at like anyone who liked it the first time it's narrowed down to the people who are looking at it for the second time. And
That's exciting.
It's not something I like really think about, because I'm after so many years of sending out query letters and getting rejected, you kind of get used to like keeping your expectations at a medium place.
To it.
Right.
So I really don't think about it when it's not like coming at me. But I mean, it would be super cool. I'm pretty optimistic that something would happen, only because like whether the execution pays off for people or not, the idea is a cool one. Like,
absolutely,
it's so cool.
Like I feel lucky to have thought of it, but anyone could have before me. And it's just a neat idea. So like you don't even have to tell the same story I did. Just make a show where rock bands or mercenary bands are treated like rock stars, and you got a basis of a good show.
I mean, it feels in retrospect, it's easy to say, oh, anyone could have thought of this, but it also seems so uniquely and truly you. And it sounds like when you moved away from trying to be Guy Gabriel K, which like only Guy Gabriel K can be Guy Gabriel K.
That's a tough one to try to emulate, by the
way. So I mean, and we've talked about his work some on the show before. We're both big fans of Tigana, and Charles, huge fan of Lions of Our Son.
No, Under Heaven.
Under Heaven. Yeah, that I haven't read that one yet. But anyway, point being, we moved away from trying to replicate that and became you just like using your natural humor and writing about things you care about, like music, and using it as an analogy. I don't know. I think those are the books I tend to most enjoy, and why I feel like I love besides the obvious reasons why I love Kings of the Wyld, is this like, it just feels like your voice comes through. And even like talking to you now or watching other interviews from you, it's like, you can just tell that's the person who wrote this book.
Yeah. Obviously, and like everything worked out in like a, in a way, like with whether it's like the humor of the book and sticking to the musical references and things like that, because it could have been done with like a lighter touch, maybe even too, like just use the terminology and then not, put references or anything like that in there. And but at the same time, it could have been a different book if a different editor had gotten a hold of it too, and I could have been the same author. But when I had the two authors on it, one of them was straight, wanted the music references gone, was looking for more like a Crombie, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I'm very lucky that I found someone that was okay with like making it what it is, letting it be what it is.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think we can all agree that no matter what happens, TV show, film, web series, whatever it is, it's going to need a nice music licensing budget. Like that's priority number one.
Like that.
Oh, it'd be amazing.
Because we're going to pull on some of the big boys here for this. So
yes,
I know. I think I've talked to the people about it, and I was like, it's such a major part of it that it'd be crazy not to have those songs. Right. I've always thought you could probably get away with like, if you get a good song for the opening credits, a good song for the closing credits, if you at the very bare minimum, if you could license one song on an episode, you could probably make it work.
Right.
The more the merrier, but you can make it work.
I mean, what's good about the concept is the possibilities are endless. You can make of it what you want,
Yeah. And you've already got a playlist for them, Nick. You did the heavy lifting already. I mean, what are they waiting for?
Yeah, here's the short list.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I love the playlist, by the way. It's
good.
I tried to make one in honor. You took all the good ones though, so I was trying to say I'm gonna make one that just complements it.
Yeah, well, some people have made playlists, and some of them are absolutely excellent.
Yeah, for sure. There's so many fun things to draw on to add to create a playlist, so it doesn't surprise me at all that all those things are in there.
But and it's tough to pick out songs too, like obviously there's so many songs that would be great to be on there. But.
Yeah, the possibilities are endless. So I'm looking forward to that when it eventually happens. And we know you're a huge gamer as well. And I always thought Kings of the Wyld would be a great, almost like a beat 'em up, but nothing too generic, right? Because you can like swap through the cast members and just kill a bunch of things, and there's cool music playing. Have you thought about like potential? I know you don't want to put anything out there too concretely in the world about what it could look like, but since you're such a big video game enthusiast, like have there been multiple different kinds of genres you'd want to see Kings of the Wyld go in?
I think for me, the one that I would probably like to see it in the most is kind of like the one that's been used for like D&D type games, which is like the top-down isometric one. Kind of when you run around like Baldur's Gate, and then it's turn-based once you get into it. I think that lends itself to like you have voice acting, you have lots of reading, you can put all the pithy and funny characters in there, and I think that kind of stuff lends itself well to like a D&D type setting, and I love that kind of game, so it would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I could see it almost like Final Fantasy VII remake, where you can rotate. I don't know if you played that. I know you're a huge Final Fantasy fan, like myself. But yeah, how you can kind of rotate which character you are.
That'd be pretty wild if it had that sort of budget. That'd be pretty crazy.
Yeah,
it deserves it.
Yeah. Well, maybe if it gets picked up as a TV show or a movie or something like that, then there's probably a lot more possibility of a game happening.
Right.
For sure, like the route of The Witcher, or it's just a multimedia phenomenon.
Exactly.
That's what we're hoping.
Yeah.
I'm sure Sapkowski never would have imagined those stories turning into what they ended up turning into.
It's like, what, 20, 30 years later?
I feel like the sky's the limit, and Kings of the Wyld, it's got such a good hook, such a good story to back it up. You're such a funny, relatable guy. I don't know. I do think the sky's the limit.
Yeah, I think even if this, if the option thing doesn't happen, it falls through now, then you never know. It could, someone at any time, someone could be like, okay, well, this is a pretty good idea, hopefully. So, yeah, we shall see. But the people who have it, they have been really great about letting me have like a voice on. When they go to write their pitch, like they let me pretty much write it, or make changes, whatever changes I wanted to it, and they all of them.
That's great. That's good to hear, because sometimes you wonder like how much voice the author gets once it's handed off to another medium. So it's good to hear that you're like collaborating and it's going well.
It probably depends on who gets it, and also whether the author is like one of those people that's like, you got to make it just like the book, which when they run into that, they're probably like, well, let's cut this guy right out because he's an idiot.
Right.
Because you have to like, as someone who I love movies and I love TV shows, and it's like, I know damn well that you don't put the same story in a book exactly into a TV show. It doesn't like function. So to me, like the characters are important, and then the story is you make it work for TV. I'd love to have
I think that's a great perspective as someone who's just read a lot of books and watched a lot of movies. I can't help but agree. It reminds me of what, like, I think it was Brandon Sanderson, because he's going through a similar option thing as well. And he said something like, when I'm writing the screenplay for Mistborn, I'm kind of taking the story and throwing it out the window and starting over from scratch, and knowing that story exists, but hitting the story at different moments and basically rebuilding it from the ground up. And I always thought that approach was very smart and very insightful, because it's two different mediums completely. To try and cram everything from Mistborn and make a faithful adaptation, it's too tricky. So I think a lot of fans do understand that, and I think it makes it easier for you as a writer to understand that going in, just because you won't feel that they're taking your vision and distorting it. So, right.
Distorting itself first.
Yeah, it must take a lot of acceptance to be able to like hand off your baby like that to someone else. So it's good to know that. Yeah,
and at the same time, it's just like, if it got made into a show or something like that, it would be like, aside from like, say, any money you would get from that, your book sales would go up, and it would just take a lot of your life's worries away. So, ultimately, worst comes to worst, just you just got to accept that your book sales would go up and you can make money doing that. If the TV show turned out to be a disaster or something like that, you'd be like, oh well.
That's very Abercrombian of you. He's one of your influences. He's always like, I would love an incredible adaptation of the First Law, but I'll settle for a lucrative but bad adaptation of the First Law.
Yeah, because there's only so much influence you have, like I don't even like choose my own book covers. So why would I get to choose,
Wow.
Right.
I know they're gorgeous though.
It went pretty well.
Yeah, it went really well.
Okay.
Yeah, we've listened to you praise like the book cover artist in other interviews, and I just think that's so awesome. And it's part of this trend that I've seen of just the fantasy genre stepping up its game in terms of book covers. Like we just also saw The Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne, and we're obsessed with that book cover as well.
Incredible.
And, like I find myself trying to pull like the covers without all the text on it, and using those for creative stuff like screen backgrounds and things like that. And yeah, so you really, that just kind of came together for you. I know that you had admired that artist for a long time, but it sounds like you really didn't have too much hand in making it happen.
No, I mean, I think I had put like a couple days before I got the call about getting an editor, like having an offer. I had put a couple book covers up on my Instagram that were both done by Richard Anderson that I just happened to buy at the bookstore. And I think my editor had seen that. And because at the time we were negotiating over the title, like the book's original title was just Banned. And they suggested a million other titles. And I was like, no. Even though I knew I was going to have to pick something else besides the band because they were not having it.
Right.
And so I think because of that, she knew that I was going to have to lose on that title front. Right. So she was like, went above and beyond. Everyone there went above and beyond in orbit to like get Richard Anderson and get me a cover, because I'm also very picky about fantasy covers. Like there's so many. I so judge books by their covers, and there's so many fantasy covers that I don't like, and styles that I don't like. I was so worried, especially at the time when I was like, the title's not going to be one I choose. The cover's probably going to suck. Oh man.
Yeah.
And then suddenly like Kings of the Wyld got suggested, and all my friends and family and I loved that one. And then Richard Anderson happened. So I really, really, really lucked out.
Nice. Yeah, because we often gripe about book titles and book covers and fantasy genre as well. But no, we like everything about the way you had set the book up. The hooks are all there, so well done. And we have a lot to be jealous of. Great book title, great cover, great story, obviously. But one of the things we're also super jealous of is your blurbs on the Abercrombie Age of Madness covers. We're big Abercrombie fans as well.
Pretty amazing, eh? No, that's
yes.
Yeah, so when we saw that, we were like, oh, okay, this guy, we run in the same circles, and like it's like I can see the influence. Like your books are very different, but I can see some of the comparisons, and like there is this almost kind of drier, more kind of scathing, not afraid to be absurd humor that permeates throughout the books. Yeah. And I wonder if there's any other influences beyond the humor that you've drawn from Abercrombie, and like what you think of the Age of Madness. We just started reading it as well. Dylan's read them all, but we just started reading them too.
Yeah, no, I love them. I mean, Age of Madness, I got to read the first one early because my US editor is the same as his US editor.
Right.
Yeah, and so I got sent that book super early, and I never ever thought that I'd be able to like blurb it, obviously. But it was super cool. I loved it. And then I kept hearing between the first and the second book, I kept hearing people talk about how good his audiobook narrator is.
Oh yeah, Stephen Pacey is
incredible,
phenomenal.
So I listened to the second one on audiobook, and I thought, I'm not sure I'll ever read another one again. Like I'll buy them because I want them. But oh my God, he's good.
Like, he's just so good. He narrated all of like the first law, like sharp ends. Yeah. He does it all, and it's so incredible. Like to hear him do Glocta, like when he changes the internal versus the external, it's like whoa.
So I love those series, love those books. The second one especially, I thought was incredible. The battle. Have you ever read the second one yet?
Yeah. I've started it. I haven't finished it, but I finished the first one.
He does a thing in both books. I think there's a couple scenes of it maybe in the second one, and there's a chapter in each called The Little People, where he just like skip from perspective to perspective like really quickly. And he's just like, no one does what he does as far as like, here's a character and I'll get one paragraph and you're like in them. He's so good at it.
Yeah, his use of POV is insane. Like the reading all his work in publication order, you can see him like experimenting with it, and like there's chapters in the Heroes that do stuff that's very similar. It's just outrageous, and he's continued to do that, and it's such a interesting thing, because when you read books like Game of Thrones, where the POV is like everything, it's very serious, and it's a whole chapter, and the title's just the character name, and then you juxtapose that against like Abercrombie, who's like, I'll just go through 20, and it's in 5 pages. You're like, what? Can you do that? Is that allowed?
And to me, there's a lot of humor in his books without a lot of like telling you that there's humor. Like I find in a lot of books, the characters will laugh at something, like so and so laughed, and I'm like, what's funny? Like the person just said, that's not a, that's a
it's like a laugh track.
Yeah, it's not a joke. You know, and they certainly don't laugh enough, I don't think. Like I think in real life people laugh constantly, you know. So but yeah, there's just, you know, it was like so and so laughed, and it just But with Joe Abercrombie, I don't think he really has that. To me, what I remember, it's just like every character is infused with a bit of, you know, a bit of humor.
Yeah, there's not a lot of like good humor going on with the characters in the story. It's just the way he writes is so absurd sometimes that it's funny.
They're not laughing at themselves, but they're
miserable.
Yeah.
But
it's a twisted sense of humor. And I'll say to Nick that how I happened upon Kings of the Wyld was years ago. I was on Reddit, and I was doing the book bingo thing they do on there. You see that ever, Nick? I know you're so. And there's a like recommended by Reddit for you. And I was a lurker back then. We weren't doing a podcast or anything like that. And I made one of my first ever posts, and I gave my taste, and it was the Abercrombie influence that had people telling me. I put like Abercrombie, Lev Grossman was on there. I think I put N.K. Jemisin as well. And I got Kings of the Wyld as a recommendation. And I was almost prepping for some grimdark, but something that when of course I read it, that I appreciate so much is how you managed to do some of this like amazing humor, laugh at the characters, laugh with the characters as well, but also the tone is really hopeful and heartfelt. So and that's one of the things that makes it, well, you can see the Abercrombie influence, it makes it again like uniquely you and different.
I mean, and granted things like change a little bit with the second book, but with that first one especially, I wanted to make it like keep it fun above all else. I take so much flack, and I think you guys might even mentioned it actually, about someone sustaining a grievous injury to
we did
way to keep the spoiler free,
quickly, you know, and to me and like years, just, you know, I've heard it a million times, people are like, it should have just like not get it rectified, but to me it's like it's worth it because Moog, you know, there's a joke about him regrowing a limb, and Moog makes a joke about like his hand smelling like starfish. And to me, it's worth it for that joke alone. I don't care about consequences. Like, obviously, I want the retention, but honestly, the jokes and the funniness come first to me, at least in that kind of thing. And so, if I could get a couple good jokes out of it, which I thought I did in the airship with Timax, you know, I thought, to me, it's
like the whole. I was about to drop a spoiler, but the pun you played on Clay's nickname at that moment was funny, and
I mean, it's hard not to spoil it at this point, and I don't even think it's that big a spoiler, really.
No
context of it,
right?
But to me, if I couldn't get some jokes out of it, I wouldn't even have the event have happened. So it's just like. I did it so I could get some jokes.
Right. And I think that's where we landed too, because like we've been so conditioned with all this grimdark and stuff that's like everything has to have consequences. People have to be miserable. Like they have to sustain horrible injuries and be miserable and be in pain. But it's like, well, the caveat of like that's not what this book is like it's not important to what's happening, you know. It's just something that happened and is fun, and I think we started to come around on that, because like I'm not saying that needed to happen. It's just like funny how after reading so many books where the realism in like these people suffering is a core part of the book, it's to read something that I think we also said is like just unabashedly fun and itself. That's not, you don't need that. It's not like a criticism. It's not like a demerit.
And it's not when I'm like, you know, if someone criticizes that, I'm not like, oh, you're stupid, because it's fair. It's a fair thing. I too am conditioned that way in books, and sometimes prefer it. you know. But there's 1,000 books where someone loses a limb and never gets it back.
Right. And that larger perspective of commitment to the humor and the jokes, we would not want you to have lost that. So coming in through that frame, I think, even if it gave one moment that a lot of people end up being frustrated or annoyed or whatever by, it's like, well, you wouldn't want Nick to be approaching this book differently than that. And in fact, the reason you're like passionate about it is because you really, really enjoyed the book and were invested in the characters.
Yeah.
And
well, not everything's going to work for everybody. So yeah, I just got to hope you hit most of the time. Right. That said, people be dying in Bloody Rose, so
yeah. Well,
so that's a great segue. Yeah, what was it like? Like, Kings of the Wyld was, like we said, kind of like your baby. You'd been working on it for a long time. What was it like doing all of that, and then all of a sudden, great, now time to start book 2? Is there some part of you that's like, that was like my life's work, and now you want me to do a second one, like turn around a second one?
Well, I think Kings of the Wyld, I wrote it. It came out pretty quickly and pretty easily. That. Yeah, I was like, oh, here we go again. But Bloody Rose was obviously a lot harder to write, and it was even worse. But with Bloody Rose, like I was writing it in the thick of it right when Kings of the Wyld came out, and you definitely it just definitely kind of fucks with you when you see people's like reviews of it or expectations for the second one, or and sometimes especially when a book, it sounds like stupid to say, but if it's doing really well, you're like, oh, now this one has to be as good, or and even the fact, like the second book, I never wanted to, like, Kings of the Wyld is a self-contained story. The whole point of it, and what makes it, to me at least, so special is that it's those people's last adventure. And yes, they're gonna get dragged into the drama in future books, but they're not the center of it. And so going into the second book, my editor knew beforehand. She's like, people aren't going to like that it's not about these guys anymore. And I'm like, 100%, but you just can't, to make that story special, you can't tell it again. You just can't.
Yeah.
And although, and the same thing, I say this all the time too, I think that Bloody Rose is a far better book as far as how it's written, how deep the characters are, because Kings of the Wyld, I think a lot of the ease of that book and why people can relate to it so well is because the characters are very, like, they are archetypes, and they're very typical to what we've read in fantasy before, and especially for a lot of fantasy readers are kind of older, not always older people, but they're kind of like they can relate to Clay so easily. So when you write a book that's not about like a middle-aged white guy, it's a lot more difficult, and so Kings of the Wyld will always be, to me, like the best hook, getting the band back together, old guys. It makes it inherently funny because it just simply is inherently funny, the idea that they're old. So writing a book that was about a younger band, it's a lot more difficult to make it funny. And especially because I'm moving into like the 80s. So the books are very much defined by like the music of that era. So the 80s or the 70s book got to be like rambling and whimsical, and the 80s book has to be a bit more like hardcore, like go 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 go, those 80s rock, like Motley Crue, like Guns N' Roses, were crazily self-destructive. They're trying to be like, look at us, we're bigger and better than these bands that came before us, and they just went like so hard. And and then even if you had toured with Led Zeppelin, you'd probably really like Led Zeppelin. You'd really get along with them, and what nice guys. And we drank tea after this, or we drank whiskey sometimes. But if you toured with Guns N' Roses, you'd get off tour and you'd be like, those fucking guys. And like, I can't see Axl Rose again. So it's hard to make, and Rose is literally named for Axl Rose. So it's like you're trying to make her somewhat likable and relatable as not the main character, but as the titular character. But you can't sacrifice, to me at least, you can't sacrifice the idea that you shouldn't necessarily like her she should be abrasive somewhat.
Right. But she's got be a bit of an ass, like Axl is.
But at the same time, it's also a pretty classic music story too, because it's the whole like Almost Famous. It's like it takes the perspective is that of the bard going on the road with the band. So it's not as huge as like the getting the band back together thing, but the rock journalist on the road with her band it's a pretty classic story too. So
I'm looking forward to reading it. And then the third book as well, you said it moves into the 90s, you've mentioned. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I know Dylan loves some 90s bands, right, Dylan?
Counting Crows is a big one for me. I don't know if they'll make any appearance or any sort of they were huge though. They were one of the biggest bands out there during that time. August and Everything After was like which is an interesting thing, it was number 2 on the charts for like a preposterous amount of time, and stuff kept jumping over it. But huge. Yeah,
I think there's maybe one Counting Crows song on the playlist at the moment.
Yes.
I'm not feeling it's Long December.
Oh yes,
there's no Hootie and the Blowfish, so I'll tell you that.
No, I see. That's like a big thing for me, is that Counting Crows gets lumped in with a lot of. They're a lot deeper. Like Adam Duritz is an incredible writer. He went to Berkeley. Charles knows I'm gonna get going too much on this, but it's So then they get lumped in with some of these other bands. It's like Hootie and the Blowfish. I Only Want to Be With You. It doesn't have that same depth. But Long December is one of my favorites. Fantastic choice. And you went Recovering the Satellites instead of August and Everything After that, which is a little bit of a deeper cut.
Well, it just depends on kind of the themes that you're going for. And there's a lot of groups and bands on there that I've listened to that I wouldn't have thought originally that would play such a big influence. But the more you get into it, same with 70s music and the same with 80s, you hear a lot of things you didn't hear before. And so a lot of it covers a similar theme, whether it's different genres, but like Nirvana, Rage Against the Machine, like NWA, Nas, like they're all like pissed off kind of about the state of society in their own way, and they're all dealing with it in their own separate way. So like as a teenager I listened to Rage Against the Machine, and I didn't like really connect with them because I was a pretty privileged little kid, and I was like, why would you hate the police? Like, I don't understand. They're our friend.
Yeah.
And nowadays, I'm like, okay,
now I get it.
Make a good case. That's so funny.
So sounds like this third one has a chance to be, I guess, both introspective in some ways and angsty in some ways.
I hope so. I think it's be a harder thing to make funnier because of its subject matter, and the music, it leaves less room for that. But ultimately, it'll just be a matter of trying to find that middle ground between, take your influences from the music, but then ultimately just tell the character story, and you don't necessarily. I don't have to tie it to the real world so drastically, But, just tell the evolution of. I'm trying to tell the evolution of like these characters and their world. So
that's interesting. Right. And then there's another thing that you have mentioned in the past that Dylan and I want to just say we support 100% if it ever happens. But you were talking about a short story collection called The Bards. Is that something that is still in the back of your mind as maybe one day?
That's a Patrick interview.
Yeah, maybe. Like it's hard to like write prequels just because all you're going to do is either meet or dash someone's expectations. You're probably not going to exceed them. I can't imagine someone going, whoa, this is way better than I thought it was going to be.
Right.
So, but maybe it'll happen in like smaller forms, but that's something like Joe Abercrombie's Sharp Ends, he had written more short stories and then was like, okay, I've got enough to put into a book. So we'll see. I'd almost rather write something like, either it's just like spin-off stories of smaller characters. Like I've always kind of wanted to write like a Laugh Leaf story, like something from his
yeah, that'd be cool.
Where you kind of find out in the second book, that he is like, to the army he was leading, he was like this fabled folk hero, like, oh my God, we have a champion finally, like we're gonna do this, and then everything goes wrong.
Yeah,
he himself was struggling with like, trying to, there's quote unquote monsters in his army that like have families and names and things like that, but then also things that just want to wreck shit.
Right.
And so how do you keep that how do you keep that army together long enough to be
Yeah, because there's a lot of opportunity when you go into Laugh Leaf's perspective to build a lot of sympathy for him that I think Kings of the Wild is like, he's the bad guy. But when you think about his story, it's like, well, his dad gave his prized sword to some stranger instead of him, and then his mom's dead, and like he's trying to save all these monsters who just because they're creatures doesn't necessarily mean they're evil. Like you said, they have families and stuff, some of them. So it's like that's a lot of weight to put on your shoulders, and there's a lot of like sympathy points he could earn from having his own perspective.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. So, and then you'll see with Bloody Rose, there's a lot of like the main band members of the band called Fable and Bloody Rose. I'd really kind of maybe like to explore some of their origins, because kind of like Ganelon's that hinted at. There's a character named Cura, especially, who's named for the cure. And her kind of deal is that she's covered in these tattoos, and every tattoo on her is like a past trauma that she's dealt with by putting a tattoo on her, and then during battle she can like scream its name and it rips off her flesh and like fights on her behalf.
Wow.
And you know,
that's interesting.
Every time you see another one, you're like, well, what the fuck? Like, there's one on her back that's like this giant tree, and when it crawls out of her, it like bursts into flame, and you're like, how did a burning tree hurt you? Like, what the fuck? And so I tried to like, and I have no idea either. I have like an idea, but a lot of, especially near the end, I'm mentioning a few more of her tattoos, and I'm just like, oh, these are some. I'd love to write stories that how these came to pass one of these days.
Yeah, that would be super cool. It sounds like you're creating just a really awesome like world environment, and that can foster all kinds of cool stories because it's open, it's open, and you can go through any point of music history or any kind of genre or whatever. Like Dylan and I love to compare notes on the Beatles and their story, and like we have our own theories about what Paul is like when the cameras are off and stuff like that. Like we're just so fascinated.
It seeps through when the cameras are on too. Which, by the way, the Moog synthesizer did get a mention in that Paul McCartney documentary, so I was excited about that.
Yeah, right when we were reading Kings of the Wild, that documentary comes out, and it's like all these worlds colliding for us. It was very funny, but we always thought like there's like a fantasy parallel story in there somewhere. Because they're just too fascinating. But yeah, it's again like all these possibilities, which is super fascinating. And I guess I was just wondering, like, you have the band series, which you're in the like it seems like is kind of taking over everything. Do you have like projects, ideas, things to go on, or like do you have more? Like, are you going to work on the band series for a bit longer, or are you looking on for new projects?
Well, the next book, Outlaw Empire, will definitely be the last in the band series for now. And it does. I have had like maybe one possible more idea for a book after that, but it definitely tells quite like an arc. Even though they're separate stories, it does tell an arc. It does change the world like irrevocably after it's done. Like if you were going to set like a D&D campaign setting, you'd have to kind of choose which era you wanted it set in, because the world of the first book is different from the world of the second book. The first book, or at least if you set it in like the age of Saga, there would be no arenas, there would be monsters literally everywhere attacking every town all the time. And then you set it in Bloody Rose and it's like not so much. Now there's arenas, and then if you set it in the third book, it's just drastically different. So but yeah, so there is kind of like an ending to this one. And then I think I'd like to write something different. I've got a few different ideas stewing. Some of them are for like standalone books, which I think maybe it's hard to get published standalone books these days, but we'll see. But I definitely have one idea that I think is a bit more promising than all the others that's pretty exciting. And I'd also love to like write for, like you said, I'm a huge gamer. I love to write for video games or something like that. And
that'd be so cool.
That would be cool.
Yeah, and I'm also like, I've gotten a few like people asking, or like publishers interested in doing some sort of like graphic novel, not necessarily of the band, but just in general. And I love graphic novels for years now. Ever since I started getting those probing things, I don't want to commit to any of them before I get more done on this book. But it looks like the opportunity's there, so I definitely love to take it. And
wow,
pretty cool. Yeah,
you're well on your way to multimedia phenomenon over here. You're talking about video games, you're talking about graphic novels, of course, more books, maybe some role-playing stuff. I know you're a big D&D guy. That would be really cool.
We'll see. I'd definitely love to write like graphic novels and video games for sure.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm
Amazing.
super looking forward to reading the rest of the band series and then seeing where you go after that. I'm like so fascinated, and yeah, we have dabbled in the world of graphic novels. We're big fans. You know, Saga, coincidentally, is one of our favorite works of fiction, hard stop, and then we read Monstrous on the show at the beginning of the year, and we love that as well. So we're getting into it.
Yeah.
Well, there's so many great ones out there. I'm still not all the way through Monstrous because it's so dense.
But
I love it and it's gorgeous. And then there's one that I've been reading just recently. It came out that the author got in contact with me beforehand and sent it to me early because he's like, I read Kings of the Wild and was inspired by that.
Oh wow,
cool.
And so it's a comic called Barbaric.
Barbaric.
From Bolt Comics. Yeah, you should check it out. I think there's only third issue just came out. But I loved it. It's about a barbarian who's he's cursed to always, he can never say no to people in need. And he's got an axe that talks like a bloodthirsty murderer. The axe wants to kill everything all the time.
Oh wow.
And it's really, really, really good. It's funny. It's beautifully drawn. It's fantastic.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'll have to check that out.
Characters
Dylan.
like that pulled in opposite directions constantly and trying to figure out how to be a decent person in all of it.
So far, it's hilarious. It's so good.
That's awesome. Well, we're approaching the hour, but before we wrap things up, we had again the privilege of talking with Christian Cameron, who spoke very highly of you as well, and I know you've mentioned him in other interviews, and he was talking about your interest in D&D, and he always thought you would make a good bard character. Do you feel typecasted as the bard?
No, I think I would make a good bard character as well.
Yeah, we think so too.
We agree. That's what we would choose for you.
I've actually briefly played a role-playing game with Christian. He hosts one at his house, and he was doing one that was set in the world of his Masters and Mages series. Which I just finished. I absolutely love. And he had he built the whole town, these medieval.
Of course he did.
Of course.
Yeah. And let me tell you, I damn near got killed because I'm used to this run gun, do stuff, and I ran into a building with guns ablaze, and I was immediately shot several times. I think I managed to die by the skin of my teeth, and I dragged myself out. But I learned some lessons. He writes books that are a bit more realistic than mine. So.
Yeah, that guy's. It doesn't surprise us at all that he made the whole board and everything. That feels very much in the spirit of Christian Cameron.
But yeah, I know he's an incredible human being. I met him a couple of years ago at a conference in Toronto, and just he's obviously a wonderful friend and a pretty huge influence. There's so many authors out there that even like myself that kind of struggle with managing their time and managing people's expectations and things like that, and he has none of that. He just goes to work, writes those books. So prolific, and then outside of that he has so many hobbies. He's got time for his family. He's amazing at managing his whole life, and yet just being so professional. He's great.
I'm imagining all these secret author meetings between you, Christian Cameron, Sebastian, Evan Winter. Do these things happen? Do you put the hooded cloaks on?
He's brushing the dust off the tinfoil hat.
Don't have the hooded cloaks, but I did a while ago. I got to go to dinner with Sebastian and Christian, which was pretty cool for me.
Wow, it's full circle from when you were waiting on
dinner. Well, yeah.
And then they invited me. They do have a meeting every Friday, kind of, they hang out.
I knew it.
Few other authors as well. And I rarely go just because I don't I'm either busy during that time of day, and I don't always talking to people constantly.
Sure.
So I feel bad about missing it, but yeah, it's always great to see them. And yeah, both of them, both Christian and Sebastian, have become really, really good friends of mine. So
I recommend getting the robes, and having the ceremony and all that,
I know, maybe got candles in front of our faces.
Yeah, some Latin phrases, to start off the meetings. Yeah. That would be cool. But, oh man, Dylan, is there anything else we should ask Nick while he's here? I mean, it's just so crazy that we're talking to you. We're super appreciative that you took the time to reach out. It's like, you mentioned like advocating for yourself at the beginning, and we were like, oh, he just put this tweet about us. You think we can just email him? It's like, well, let's see what happens. And the fact that you reached out was super incredible for us. So this is a big deal for the show.
I think you'd be surprised how many authors would absolutely love to do a podcast. Like if you're ever kind of worried about it, I think, especially with the state of publishing these days, outside of maybe someone like Brandon Sanderson, who hasn't got the time and probably wouldn't even see an email. I don't know what his life is like. But, everyone needs to, publishing has changed so much that even people I think that were popular in the 2000, would love to get more publicity now, just because, things moving on from grimdark. So yeah, reach out to whoever you want. I'm sure you guys get a lot of bites on that.
Well, you were definitely definitely a whale for us. So we're super appreciative that you came on here.
Yeah, I mean, unbelievably grateful. It's a dream come true for us, because this is, I mean, literally, I read Kings of the Wild well before we even thought we'd ever do a podcast or anything like that. And it's like surreal to be on a Zoom call talking to you, and you're such a good guy, so nice, and
so
yeah, it's really, really cool, and we're just like so grateful for you coming on.
I appreciate it. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Well.
Oh yeah, of course. The only last thing I could think to ask you, Nick, I think we asked you so much and been so generous with your time. Where is the best place for folks to find you out there on the internet? We know you got Twitter and all that.
Yeah, I would say probably Twitter. I'm not as active as I kind of used to be on there, but I'm still on there. Instagram, I'm relatively active on. I share a lot of like books that not necessarily that I've read, but like buy new books or buy new comics all the time, and I'll always make sure to like showcase them on there. And yeah, if you want the occasional picture of my cat. I'm on Facebook, but I'm probably not going to be on Facebook for much longer.
I feel like that's pretty
I just got off there too. Yeah. But I saw your new shades on Instagram recently. So
cool. Well, this is my first non-glasses interview in probably, I don't know, forever. So I've had glasses just for years and years and years. So I finally took the plunge and got myself some contacts again.
What a shame that this is an audio-only format, too.
You
can't even show it off.
Can't see these baby blues.
I know. Well, dear listeners, just know that, it's a very special moment for us over Zoom.
Remarkably handsome man.
Exactly.
All three of us, really. It's just ridiculous.
Well, now you're just buttering us up.
You're too much, yeah.
We've always said we've had faces for podcasting, so
if only we had voices for it.
Yeah, it's true. But oh god, guys, Nicholas Eames, check him out on Twitter and Instagram, and check out Kings of the Wild, the first book of the band series, and then Bloody Rose is out as well. Third book coming. Yep. And so many other great things are in the corner. Potentially some sort of film option. We'll see how it goes. Potentially a comic book. Potentially video game. You know what? It's all happening, but get on the ground floor of it now, for sure. I mean, it's hard to think of like this is the ground floor considering the band series is taken off, but
winning awards since 2017.
Yeah, we're not in the basement anymore. It's only the beginning, guys. So be sure we're going to pick up Bloody Rose in the very near future. Looking forward to that. And then Nick, thank you so much for your time. And we could talk forever about our music preferences. I know Dylan has a lot of Final Fantasy takes. He could have a whole nother hour to talk to you about that. But I think for now we've said enough. We've done enough. And just Nick, thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Well, thank you again for having me. And yeah, if you're ever hard up for another guest, you hit me up.
Oh, doors always open.
We'll take you up on that,
Nick.
Open. Thanks again.
Right.
Thanks so much.
Yes, I'm sure we'll pull you in the near future. Be careful what you offer, because we will definitely take you up on it.
Sounds good.
All right, guys, thank you so much for listening. Check out Nicholas Eames. Google them and follow all the stuff, buy all the things, and thank you so much for listening. That's the biggest thing, and as always, guys, go forth and conquer, friends.